In this third video, I want to speak to you for a few minutes about the apostolic foundations and values that underpin our work into the churches that we're serving in the nations from here in East Grinstead. One of the phrases that we're beginning to use and understand is the idea of moving from a focus to development rather than aid in the countries that we're working in, moving from a crisis mentality to some long-term thinking and building, moving from dependency, unhealthy dependency on handouts and old ways of operating from the West into other countries to a much more kind of future, mutual, fruitful sufficiency. Remember in the last video I asked the question about the primary place that we're working in Italy. Who are the best people to reach Italians? And of course the answer is the Italian believers themselves. They're the ones that have grown up in their cities, in their culture. They already know their language. One of the ways that we've decided that we're going to work in terms of laying apostolic foundations is to not send teams of Brits primarily as our main strategy over to do the work of church planting for our Italian friends. Rather, we would like to identify groups of believers who share similar vision and values, to come alongside them, to help lay a New Testament foundation with them, to father them, to help them to flourish and grow up into all that God has for them so that they can reach their city and their nation with the gospel. All of this is intended, like with fathers and children, that we enable them to grow up and learn to do things for themselves rather than have it done for them. This is where the idea of development rather than aid fits in so well. Everywhere that we work around the world is in some sort of crisis. And if they're not in crisis right now, they will be in the future at some point. For us as a local church in the south of England, there are always crises, there are always battles that we have to face. We lurch from one to another. If we think developmentally rather than just responding to crisis, it means we may avoid falling into some of the holes in the road along the way. Indeed, if we think developmentally in the future, we may even build a new kind of road altogether. Let me ask you a hypothetical question that's very close to the way that we're working with our friends and partners in Zambia. Imagine if they needed to find £5,000 to build a new orphanage for their work with HIV/AIDS orphans. Under the old way of thinking, where we respond to crises and where we develop perhaps an unhealthy missionary dependency, we would give them £5,000 and we would send some skilled builders from the UK over to do the work for them. Fantastic, the job would be done, orphans would be cared for, but in a few years' time, as the building degenerates and as more orphans are taken in and a new building is needed, we will be right back at square one, needing to find money and skills again to build the next building or to redecorate and refurbish the existing building. Imagine a scenario then where we think developmentally. Imagine a scenario where we give a gift or even a loan of £5,000 and we invest, having identified in some of their skilled young men and women who perhaps have some fledgling skills in the building trade. We connect them with our business guys who can think in that way, guys who can teach a little about budgeting and handling money for business. We enable them to build an orphanage and to build some other buildings, homes and offices, and begin to develop a business that grows and makes a small profit. We enable them to employ people and to grow in dignity and to care for their families and to give money into the local church. Imagine this scenario where in 5 years' time and the churches need a new orphanage, they can afford to build it themselves out of what they've saved and budgeted and developed over the time. It's a very different kind of strategy. Imagine that applied directly into our church planting in Italy. We're working with a pastor who, like many others across Italy, is struggling to look after his family and to plant the church. He's very skilled, but working all hours of the day, 60, 70 hours a week on an hourly rate, trying to feed his family and plant the church. In the old way of thinking, we would have given him a crisis gift. We'd have committed over the next 5 years to giving him £200 or £300 a month so that he could keep going in what he's clearly called to do. However, what we've done in the last few months is create a convergence between his unique skills and one of our business guys who operates in the same kind of field. We've set up a very, very simple business model. It's not had any real involvement from me as a church leader, I've just connected the guys together. And now in the last month, our friend who's church planting in Italy has earned more in 3 or 4 days, working from home over the internet with this simple business model, earned more in that short space of time than he would normally earn in a month to 6 weeks. Understandably, he's delighted to be released back into family life and feeling as though he's planting his church in the south of Italy full time, even though he's just worked hard over the last 3 or 4 days. If we were to roll that model out across all the churches where we're partnering, if we were to ask our guys in the nations, what are the top 5 needs in your church, in your community, in your city? I think we find that there are things like business, IT, healthcare. What we can find at the same time as we turn around and look at our own congregation of people back here in the UK is that we have people who are skilled in business, who are entrepreneurial, who understand finance, who are good with IT, who are healthcare professionals or teachers. A simple convergence of bringing our skilled guys at home with our good men and women in the nations means that as we think developmentally rather than in terms of aid, we can begin to cause whole new ways of working to emerge. Monthly handouts never achieve this kind of fruit. Crisis thinking never achieves this kind of fruit. A focus on development rather than aid, though, is right at the heart of the apostolic values that are undergirding how we're partnering in the nations.